Hey family, this is Jake C from John Jay Ministries. Listen, in Psalms 63, David said of the Lord, your loving kindness is better than life. And you know, when I first read this as a young Christian, I was naive and I said to myself, what could possibly be better than life itself? You know, but it's only after I started to read about David and how God really came through in his life and manifested the things that God had planned for him and the challenges and trials that David went through. Even when God said that he was a man after his own heart, you know, David can really say that God's loving kindness, you know, is better than life. Because the truth is, you know, in this life that we live in, some things and situations and even people can do some very terrible things to us and hurt us so badly that we think we kind of want to wonder to ourselves, is this life really worth living? You know, and it is under one of these situations, these circumstances, that David wrote this particular psalm. Because the truth is, when your own children, your own flesh and blood, turns against you to try to destroy your life and to take what you have, it is a very painful situation. And that is what David went through when his own son Absalom wanted to take over the kingdom. And he had raised up a lot of the men, he had raised up mighty men of Israel to be on his side, and took them to Hebron to declare him king. And so when David heard this, David had to flee for his life. He and some of his mighty men had to flee in the desert. And you know, my friends, the thing about it is that when you're under so much stress and pain in your life, when your own family is turned against you, or even your friends or someone in your life is turned against you, that is when all of your enemies start to come out of the cracks and in the holes. Because it says that when David was going through the wilderness, this man named Shimei, who was one of Saul's servants, came out and started cursing him and throwing stones and dust and swearing at him. And you know, and it seems like when you were down, people just like to kick you. And so David had to go through all of this stress and all of this pain and hurt when his own flesh and blood was destroying him. And that's when David wrote this psalm and said, my soul thirsteth after thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. And he said, you know, and he's longed to see the power of God again in the sanctuary like he did before. He said, because your loving kindness is better than life. And he said, but I will continue to praise you. I will continue, you know, in the midst of all of the challenges that he went through, David said, I will still praise you. I will still lift up your name in my heart, and in my hands will forever give you praise. Because he said, this is what he said, because you have been my help, Lord. You know, you have been my shield, Lord. In the shadow of your wings I will rejoice. You know, and my soul longeth and clingeth hard after you. In the midst of David's challenges and trials, he reflected on the goodness and the loving kindness of God in his life, because God has been good to him, and he would not relent, because he believed at the end of the day that God will come through for him. Listen, when David first received the kingdom from Saul, when Saul passed away and Jonathan passed away, the first thing David said to his people, you know, who out here that remaineth out of Saul's lineage that I can show God's kindness to? And they said to him, there is one that remaineth, Mephibosheth, but he was crippled. And David said, yes, bring him up, I will show him God's kindness. And so the first thing he did was to give Ziba, who was Mephibosheth's servant, give back all of the possession that had belonged to him. And he said, you see, I want you to look after these things. And he said, but as far as Mephibosheth is concerned, he will be forever having dinner at the king's table. And from then on, David showed Mephibosheth God's kindness, and he was always having dinner at the king's table. But you know what, my friends? I said that to say that when David was in that dry wilderness, that God still came through for him. The same kindness, the same loving kindness that he showed to Mephibosheth is the same kindness that he received in return. Because the Bible says that Ziba came through with some asses loaded with food and fruits and dry raisins and wine. And he said, these asses for the king to ride on, and these fruits and these food and wine is for your servants who are tired and thirsty in this dry wilderness. And I want to tell you, my friends, that God will always come through for you. Always remember that God's loving kindness is better than life itself. That even when your own flesh and blood, even when your family, even when strangers, even when your colleagues, your workmate, your bosses turn against you, remember that God's loving kindness is better than life. Because sometimes in this life, we can be served a hard ball, and sometimes it can cause us a lot of pain, but God is forever faithful. God is forever true. God will never leave you nor forsake you. His loving kindness is better than life. The Bible says that God commended his love towards us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And if Christ died for us, and when we were not his, how much more would Christ do for us, knowing that we are his? So I want to tell you, my friends, regardless to whatever wilderness you're going through today, remember David. Remember his experience. Remember what God has brought you through. You might have lost your job. You might be sick, but God has brought you through. If God closed a door, he will open another door for you, my friend. God is faithful, and he will come through for you, because his loving kindness is better than life itself. Remember that and call on his name. This is Jason John J Ministry. See you next week.